Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as my guest Aypril Porter. Aypril Porter is an ICF-certified life and grief coach, death doula, and human design guide. She helps soul-led entrepreneurs reparent themselves and rebuild aligned, burnout-free businesses through her signature approach, Lead from Within. She's also the author of Parenting the Child You Have and offers deep healing through compassionate closure readings. And she also has a really fabulous podcast, the Living Matters podcast, which I had the privilege of being a guest on. And so if you get a chance, I would encourage my listeners to take a listen to April's podcast. She has some very impactful guests. And with that, Aypril, welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast. I've been looking forward to our conversation for some time now.
Me too. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, and we met through, I think, a Be a Guest podcast forum. I responded. I liked the mission of your podcast. Thankfully, you responded to me, and one thing led to another, and here we are today.
Yes. And that has been one of the most popular episodes too. So people really love what you shared.
Oh, that is good to know. And I think anytime our stories and our life paths and what we do and what we've learned can make an impact in at least one person's life, we've done our job. So thank you for that feedback. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's how I feel about the book that I wrote. It's like, if one person takes something away from this, then it was worth it.
Absolutely. And I would suspect that more than one person has taken many teachings from your book, and from your podcast. Anyway, I guess we might as well get right down to it. I have a few questions, as you know, and I know my audience is going to be curious about what you do. Among your many categories, you're a human design specialist. What is a human design specialist, and how does what you do help others find their authentic purpose in life?
Yeah, that's a big question. Human design is something that is relatively new. So it was channeled by a man who went by the name of Ra Uru in 1987. So pretty new, but it's based on ancient wisdom. So the I Ching, the Kabbalah, the chakra system, astrology, and quantum mechanics. So it's a combination of all of these things, but not one in their entirety. And with that, there are chart software out there that you plug in your birth date, time, and place, just like astrology. And you get this chart that has all these symbols and numbers on it, and it really looks quite confusing at first. But what I do is interpret that chart and the energy behind it. So it's similar to astrology, but it's different. And I will have to say that I am one of those people who, anytime there's a personality test, I was like, let's take this. Let's see what it says. What can it reveal about me, right? But I have never found anything that is as accurate and useful as human design is for me. And I think one of the reasons that is because like the Enneagram is really cool, but it's another one of the things like the Myers-Briggs where we are self-identifying with who we are right now. And the human design chart looks at the energy imprint that we were born into. So it's a place where we can peel off the conditioning layers that we've acquired in this life to get back to the truth of who we are and live that authentic life. Whereas, like Enneagram is, well, I've had these experiences. So now I'm, an introvert, or I'm shy, or I'm, different things. And we can see something different a lot of times in the human design chart. And when we start peeling back those layers, we get to live as who we are meant to be and expand infinitely.
Yeah, when you were talking, you go through the definition or what human design charts are, or what the human design paradigm is, the first thing that came into my head was the Enneagram in terms of how would the Enneagram align with human design work. But it sounds like it's much different, is that essentially we're looking at the root causes that contribute to our own unique human design and the energy that we were born into. What are some of those layers that you peeled back in a specific session? What have been some of the common layers that prevent individuals from getting in touch with their authentic self?
Yeah. So there are different elements that we talk about, like energy type, your strategy, and your inner authority, how you make decisions. There's a profile, which is kind of the character that we play in life. And then there are what we call centers in the chart. And these centers are big energy themes. So one of these is around emotions. There are two different ways that this shows up. One is where we have what it's called a defined emotional center. And that is somebody who has emotional waves that they are sending out into the world all the time. It's not something they can stop. It's not something that they can control necessarily. It's just a steady movement of up and down throughout life. And these are people who are designed to wait to make big decisions until they have emotional clarity. But it's really easy for that person to jump into decisions when they're on the high of the wave and everything feels great. And it's like, yes, I'll say yes to this podcast and this business and this job and all these things. And then maybe a week later or a day later, or even an hour later, sometimes you go, oh my goodness, what did I get myself into? I don't want to do any of that. Or the opposite of that, when you're in the low of a wave and you turn down an opportunity because you're not feeling great. And then later you decide, oh man, I should have waited a little longer because that might have been a good thing for me. So we have these people who are sending out emotional waves into the world. No matter what they do, it's always present. And then the other half of the population is what we call the emotional empath. They are open in receiving those emotional waves. So these are not people who don't have feelings, which is a common misconception when people are new to human design, is like, I don't have emotions because this is not defined. And that's not true. It's just that you feel things in response, in relationship. So something happens and you have an emotional reaction, whereas the person with the emotional waves is just constantly moving up and down through a wave. So the emotional empaths are people who walk into a room where there's somebody in their emotional wave. They don't have to say anything. They can be completely quiet. This person walks into a room with this emotional empath and they feel it, right? So they feel that maybe it's anger, maybe it's sadness, whatever it is. And all of a sudden that person starts feeling like, oh, I'm sad. Why am I sad? And so when we look at the human design chart and we can see this, it helps us to pull back those layers and say to the person who feels like they're always so emotional, or they were told as a child that they were so emotional and erratic, those people are taking in other people's emotions and misidentifying them as their own. So it helps us to understand, am I the person sending out the emotional wave, or am I the person taking in everyone's emotional wave? And then how do I care for myself for either one of those?
Yeah, particularly with empaths, it's also they've taken so much energy that they can become out of balance because they become the emotion of that other person. They become enmeshed with that. And I would imagine you have a lot of protective strategies that you deal with emotional empaths, whether it's protective meditations, whether it's energy protection, certain things that they can do to protect themselves from that and to find some greater balance and clarity. So yeah, some of the empaths that I've talked with, they tell me it's a real challenge, kind of really trying to manage their own energy and not get enmeshed totally in somebody else's energy, because it just drains them and it just puts them out of alignment emotionally, cognitively, and spiritually.
Absolutely. And I think what the human design chart does is it gives us an understanding of why we are that way. It's not something that's wrong with us. It's not something that we are just a victim to. It's actually a superpower, right? When you can walk into a room and you can feel what other people feel, and you can not take that on as your own, but sample it and say, oh, that person is upset. Okay, maybe I need to give them a little more clearance. Or that person seems sad. Maybe I need to go say something to them. It can become that superpower that makes you really wise. But when you don't understand it, it feels overwhelming.
And it provides clarity without labeling the experience.
Yes. Yes.
One of my pet peeves, April, is that a lot of individuals who are empaths are misdiagnosed with either ADHD or generalized anxiety disorder. And an empath shouldn't be labeled, shouldn't be given a pathological label to it. It's basically how an individual relates to the world, how they take in energy, how they see the world. And it's very multidimensional. But science would like to say, well, we don't really buy that, so we're going to give you a label that kind of makes more sense with our empirical understanding. It may make sense for the individual giving the diagnosis, but it doesn't make sense for the empath.
Absolutely. And I think the other side to this with human design is that the person who has the emotional waves, there are 4 different types of waves. So whether you are the person with the wave or the emotional empath, understanding those 4 waves helps you identify what you feel from people a lot more too. We have one wave that is concerned with bonding, and it is pretty even keel. And then when something threatens a relationship, it will rise really quickly to protect. And then we'll see that big emotional response of defense. We have another one that's called a tribal wave, and it's through community and connection. And it will ratchet up over time. And it's kind of like unmet need, unmet need, unmet need. And then it explodes to have that need met, or it can reset through clarity. So it can be like the child trying to do the math problem that's frustrating. You see them building, and then all of a sudden they get it, and then everything's fine. That's kind of another expression of that wave. And then we have one that is like even keel, and it has sudden spikes high, and then it'll come back to normal, and then it'll drop really low. And so this is where we see people who identify as, I'm just a depressed or sad person. But it's really not that. It's, I feel deep melancholy. I feel deep sadness. I feel extreme highs at times, but that's not who I am. That's just what I feel. And that feeling is where we find deep creativity. We find musicians, and we see artists and poetry, and so many things come out of this energy. So it can be another superpower. And we can look at anything in the chart and say, this is really hard. Or we can look at it and say, how can we see this as a gift? Yeah. Right? This is your unique expression of who you are in this world. And let's find the highest expression of it and see how we can channel more of that and not get stuck in this, I'm wrong for being this way kind of expression.
I mean, there's a yin and a yang to everything. I think there are gifts in our sadness, there are gifts in our anger, as long as our anger isn't destructive. There's gifts in our confusion, there's gifts in our anxiety. But as a society, we've been so conditioned to look at happiness as the key to fulfillment. And happiness by itself isn't. It's being able to embrace every emotion that we contain within ourselves that is also contained in the human race, that gives us clarity, and it allows us to really find our authentic self. Because we can learn that sadness can morph into some of the most compassionate individuals you've ever seen. Anger could give us the energy to set a boundary that we know we might not have been able to do so otherwise. So if we can see the gifts in all of those experiences and see what happens to us as being information that can inform us about how to find our true authentic self, then everything becomes in service to us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that, well, there was one more emotional wave, and that is like a slow rise, kind of like an escalator rising up, and it's built on expectation. And so this is the person who thinks that things are going to turn out a certain way, or when they get to this point, things are going to be great. And when they aren't, that wave just crashes down. And then they spend time in that low of the wave before they find the next thing to build on and have that expectation. So I think when you see this from other people, whether you're the empath or you see this in yourself, if you carry one of these waves, it gives you a greater understanding of what I'm sensing. This is mine or this is not mine. And how can I enter into this for the experience of it rather than what I expect to get out of it?
Makes sense. Now, Aypril, my understanding is that you've been more recently focusing on reparenting with human design, particularly with entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the experiences that have contributed to your decision to embrace this career path?
That's a good question. I think this has probably been unfolding my whole life. So as you know, I wrote the Parenting Human Design book a couple years ago. And when I was doing that work with parents, we all think we're going into it to help our kids and that we're going to get some tools to understand our children, and we do. But what we really start to see is that these patterns come from us first. We have to heal our patterns and our wounds before we can show up to be the parent that we want to be so that our children can get what they need to be themselves. It shifted. What I thought I was going to do was work with parents with their kids. And what I was really doing was working with parents and reparenting themselves. So it kind of started there. And it was also my own journey of, peeling back the layers of why am I this way? And I think being an entrepreneur and being a parent both are two of the biggest self-growth opportunities that we have, because our children are showing us patterns every day that we need to look at. And then with entrepreneurship, we are also doing the same, especially solopreneurs, right? So we have to put ourselves out there. We have to put our prices out there and feel like we can claim that and feel confident in that. Because if we are not confident in that, nobody's going to believe us. Nobody's going to want to buy from us. So there's a lot of places where this shows up. And I can see in my own journey where I was afraid to be seen. I was labeled the shy child. I didn't like to talk in front of people. I couldn't do that. Like, there was all these limiting stories that I had about being shy and not being able to speak in front of people. Public speaking was like death to me. I was like, no, I can't do it. I mean, that was the fear. And looking at my human design chart helped me with that, but also just realizing, like, this is a story that I'm telling myself. This is a label that got put on me at some point in time, whether it was through my own experience or it was something somebody told me and I just attached to. I don't know. I don't know exactly where that originated, but I know that it was something that felt deeply limiting in my life. And so it was like, I had to peel those layers back so that I could show up on social media, so I could do this podcast, so I could be the person that I am now and run my business. And that's what I want to help other people do, is get out of their own way by helping them shift these stories. We get in our own way so many times when we don't even realize it. It's like, I'm not finding success because I don't have any clients. Well, we don't have any clients because we're not putting ourselves out there. We're not putting ourselves out there because we feel like somebody's going to criticize us, or that bully's going to come back from childhood and they're going to say something mean and we're not going to be able to handle that.
And it makes sense because, one of the things that I've told my students at Utica University and Pratt Munson School of Art is that early experiences matter. And adverse childhood experiences, whether it's unhealthy family dynamics due to alcoholism or abuse or lack of communication or emotional coping skills within that family, it does matter. It does impact how we see ourselves, how we see the world, what chances we take, what chances we don't take, how we view ourselves in public, our fear of being evaluated in public. That drives everything. And we come into this world, we're born into a family with a pre-existing story that's been forged from generation to generation. We become a part of that story. And whether or not we want to shift the narrative is going to be, one, we have to be motivated to want to shift that narrative. But we also have to be in front of supportive, non-judgmental life coaches, human design specialists, clinicians who are going to help us shift that narrative and realize that that narrative that we inherited or that we grew up with doesn't define us, and we can be empowered to shift our life story to co-create the reality that we want in conjunction with the universe.
1,000%. Yes. And I think that human design for me is that lens that helps us to see what could be different than what we perceive it to be. So there's an element called the profile in human design. And we have these two numbers that represent different elements of us. So mine is the 5-2. And the fifth line is this profile that is it's a projection profile. First of all, people project onto you what they think that you are going to do for them. So there's this kind of savior piece to it and the fixer, right? So my life, I was projected on. I experienced bullying in high school. It felt like it came out of nowhere because it was from some of my best friends. And all of a sudden they turned on me and I couldn't understand why. And that created a lot of pain and a lot of heartache. And I always question myself, like, what did I do to make this happen? What did I say, or how was I being that created this? And I turned it on myself a lot. And what I realized through human design is that we hold up, as the fifth line profile, we hold up this karmic mirror for people, and they have the opportunity to see what needs to be healed within them by engaging with us. Now, they don't have to choose to do that, but that projection is there. And so when it's projected onto the fifth line person, we feel that pain and it feels like, oh, is this mine? I have to do something with this. And there's also that feeling of like, I want to fix it. The other part to that profile is we see the highest potential in people and we want them to live up to that. And when they don't, we are deeply disappointed as well.
Yeah, it feels as if it's something that we did that caused them not to see their highest potential. When in reality, April, I believe that people aren't going to want to be fixed unless they want to be fixed. You can't empower somebody who doesn't want to be empowered. It takes two to tango. We can do our best to plant seeds and lay the groundwork, but individuals have free will to choose to do what they wish to do, even if the consequences for them as we see it are not going to be as positive as if they took the road that we would hope that they would take. But the bottom line is that people have the right to self-determine and experience their own consequences. And for individuals who do experience their own consequences, particularly when they're negative, it may also be a moment where they've got nobody to blame except themselves. And they take a look and say, I got to do something because my way isn't working. So now I'm going to be ready to take a look at what I need to do to flip the script and change my own specific, human design pattern or change my karmic destiny, however we want to look at that.
Yeah. And I think that most of us hit some point in life where we have that crisis moment where it's like, I have to do something different. We all live through experiences that create who we are. And I think a lot of life is just peeling back those layers to figure out who we aren't, really.
We're not going to get through this life unscathed.
No.
We live long enough, we're going to experience challenges that are going to test our resolve, but that are ultimately going to cause us to take pause and look at who we are and look at how we wish to reshape our priorities, expand our beliefs so that we can move forward with meaning in a world that's different.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for myself, I hit complete burnout probably 12, 13 years ago now, where I couldn't get off the couch. I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I could barely feed them and take care of them. And I was napping between. It was like I couldn't do anymore. I changed my diet. I changed my lifestyle. That was a pivotal moment for me. But a few years later, human design came into my life. And what it showed me was that my energy type is something we call the projector, which is about 20% of the population. Most people are a generator or manifesting generator, about 70%, which is people who are here to do and build and create. Yeah. And they have this renewable energy source. Well, the projector doesn't have that in the same way. We have to be very careful of how we use our energy and how we engage with others. And so what I was doing was trying to live my life as if I was somebody who had this renewable energy source and doing all the things and being the super mom and being what I thought was a good mom, right? Like you're supposed to do all of these things. And all it did was burn me out and disconnect me from who I truly am. And I didn't recognize myself anymore. I mean, I would get time away. My husband would say, go take a break, go take a couple hours to yourself. And I would leave the house and I was like, I'd go to Starbucks and get my chai. And then I'd sit in the car and I'd go, what do I do? I don't know where to go. I didn't know who I was anymore. And so it was like human design helped me find myself again, because first of all, it gave me permission to stop feeling like I had to compete and do like everyone else. And it allowed me to sink deeper into the truth of who I am and how I am designed to work with my energy rather than against it. And it stopped me from hitting that burnout constantly.
Yeah, and I think particularly, if we can't empower ourselves, we can't empower anybody else. And if we're constantly living our lives according to the expectations of how parenting should be, what our supervisors or bosses expect, if we're living our life through their eyes, we're not living our own lives. We're living our lives based on a series of expectations that in most cases don't apply to us.
And in most cases, we will never succeed at or meet because they're not our own. And we don't know what somebody else truly wants. We think we know. We think we know what they expect and we try and meet that. And when we fail, we feel like, well, I can't do anything right. And we're outsourcing our power.
Yeah, exactly. If it isn't a mission that we're aligned with or does not meet our unique needs, it's going to be a natural response that we're going to walk away from it, that we're not going to buy into it because it doesn't apply to us. But the catch-22 is then we begin to feel guilty when we don't buy into it, or, what's wrong with us? Well, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just this particular set of expectations that doesn't align with who you are. And it's okay to walk away from that experience because it isn't serving you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned your book. Can you tell us a little bit more about that book and also the companion workbook that goes along with that as well, too?
So, Parenting the Child You Have is a human design parenting book, and I wrote it. Let me say this. When human design found me, I was immediately drawn to it and immediately overwhelmed. There are so many parts and so many numbers and things to know. I could not keep it straight. It took me probably 3 years of dancing with it, of like, I want to learn of it. And then it's too much. It's too much. And so what I wanted to do with this book was to create something where somebody who was brand new to human design could pick up this book and they could read it cover to cover and learn something, or they could pick it up and look at a part of the chart and take away something. So this book it's educational as far as like, how do you use human design, but it also gives like real life examples of how you can apply it and how you might experience it. And so it's for parents, but I actually get a lot of people contacting me saying, I don't actually have kids, but your book helped me so much to understand myself and my childhood and why my parents were the way they were and why I responded the way I did. And then that led to the companion workbook, which is really about reparenting more than anything, because it's peeling back those layers of who we are as the parents so that we can be there for our children and understand our children. Really, I just want people to be able to see their children for the unique individuals that they are. I have 2 daughters, and when my second child was born, I thought, oh, she's going to be so similar to her sister, right? They're both girls. They're 2 years apart. There are similarities, but they are so wildly different. And that was so eye-opening to me because I'm an only child, so I didn't know what to expect. Just seeing that and then understanding like their needs are very different. And I think there's this idea as a parent that we want to be fair and equal to our kids. But fair and equal doesn't mean the same. Fair and equal means looking at their unique needs and meeting those for that individual child. Sometimes that means giving them more space while the other one gets more attention because that's what they need.
And the other thing I was thinking of from a sacred perspective, and I keep going back to Brian Weiss's work with soul contracts and past life regression. Each of our kids, I think, will come into this lifetime with a different soul contract. And therefore, the way we parent them becomes different based on what karmically they agreed to before coming into this lifetime. So we could have 3 kids born out of the same set of genes, same parents, and they're all going to be uniquely different. Not only because of the human experience influences with peer groups and interests that they may develop, but I also believe from a sacred perspective, because of what their souls contracted to experience in that incarnation of themselves, which means that our parenting approaches are going to be different based on that. But it also requires having a keen sense of awareness as a parent to tap into that. And I also think that's where human design and the reparenting piece can come in. Because if we can see those aspects of ourselves that are getting in the way of effectively interacting with our family members, with our children, our relationships become more fruitful and we can become more responsive on an individual basis to our children's needs.
Absolutely. And I love that about human design because it takes the things that feel so personal, like personal attacks and provoking, and it makes it just information. It depersonalizes it. And you look at it and you go, this is just energy. And this is energy like in conflict in some places where we have the potential to grow. So this doesn't mean anything about me personally. This just means this is an area where I am learning through this relationship with somebody else. And I can choose to do that, or I can choose to go learn that lesson somewhere else with somebody else. It just takes away some of the hurt that we can feel from some of those relationships, especially I find in parent-child relationships. And I see this in the death doula work I do as well, which is why I have this reading that is about compassionate closure. Sometimes this is before somebody has died and sometimes it's after. But it's really about looking at the two charts and seeing how you may have provoked each other in some places and where you were really aligned, and where maybe one person was living out the low expression and the other person was living out the higher expression of the same energy. And that conflict is there. It gives them understanding of how somebody is designed and why they are the way that they are, so that they can not take that into the rest of their life and go, why was I this way? Or why do I feel guilt because I couldn't be with this person in the way that everybody else seems to be able to with their parent, or
Or
whatever
the
that may
would,
be.
yeah, or the wouldas or the shouldas. I should have done this better. I should have seen this better. I should have said I loved you one more time. And, why did I treat this person so badly? But you're right. I mean, looking at separate human design charts and how those interacted and where the differences and similarities were, that to me would be an empowering piece of information for me and would help probably more so than talk therapy, April, come to terms with my guilt and help me learn to either manage it or even eliminate it.
Absolutely. And I want to say that, we do this reading a lot of times after somebody has died, but we do this with the idea that this is the energy blueprint that they had in this lifetime, but it doesn't show everything, right? All I can show you is how this energy works and what was in their chart. And then they kind of put the pieces together and they go, okay, well, I remember this about them. It just helps them to make sense of what they felt. And a lot of times it validates what they feel so that they don't always question that and go, well, did I imagine that? Was that not really there? Because after somebody dies, I find that we do kind of have a different perception of them. We kind of try and forget a lot of parts that we didn't enjoy. And we try and take the good parts and just amplify those. But I think that also being with those difficult parts is reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have to say, this was really hard, and that's okay. This was a lesson that we were learning together, and it's okay.
Yeah, and the human experience isn't always easy. There's a lot of messy parts to it. There's a lot of difficult parts that we experience singularly or in conjunction with the relationships that we have. And it's like you said, it's just a part of life. It's reality.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of podcasts, I know we talked about this earlier. I'd love to have you tell our audience about your Living Matters podcast and how it aligns with your life mission and your life purpose.
So Living Matters was actually my first business name when I started in nutrition. And it was kind of one of those things of like, yeah, we're talking about living matters, but living really does matter. Like how we live matters. The choices we make, what we feed our bodies, what we tell ourselves, it all matters. And the stories that we tell ourselves about our lives are what really matter. And so initially, my first season of the podcast was about human design. It was just talking about human design. But this season that we're in now is really about inviting people to come share their stories of difficult things that they've lived through, what they've learned from it, how they've overcome some of those things, and how they are still present with the grief that exists. Because once we lose something, whether it's a person or a job or a community or whatever that may be, that grief doesn't just go away, but it shifts and it changes over time. Mm-hmm. And I think that the more we tell our stories, the more we normalize that for people, and they feel less alone and they feel like it's okay to talk about it, because I think we need to talk about it more. I grew up in a family that was grieving a child that died, and they didn't talk about it. But I felt it. As a child, I felt it, and I had questions, and I felt like I didn't have a place to ask those questions without upsetting everyone. I guess I just have a big drive to bring these conversations into the light so that we can normalize talking about it and feeling sad and feeling angry and feeling moments of joy and all of it combined, because that's life. That's the human experience we were talking about.
A lot of times I like to think that grief is a microcosm of the human experience. Even without grief, there's going to be moments of joy, there's going to be moments of sadness, there's going to be moments of disillusionment, and that very much mirrors the grief experience. It's a part of who we are. If we live long enough, we're going to experience loss. And, with my story, I appreciated the forum that you created to allow my story and how I integrated grief after the transition of my daughter, how that, you created a great platform for that and just allowed my story to unfold naturally. like to do the same for my guest contributors. I want their stories to evolve naturally. I want that because our stories are important to be heard. A tragedy in life is a story that is not heard, that is not validated, that is not honored. That's, to me, the ultimate injustice in life, is when we don't create space for that.
Yeah. And I think that that's one of the things that we misunderstand about grief, is that we feel like we have to fix something, right? When somebody loses somebody, we feel like we have to fix it or we have to do something specific. And really, if we can just be present with them, if we can let them tell whatever story they need to tell, whether it's their anger or their frustration or their sadness or their disappointment or their guilt or their shame around whatever happened, that is the best gift that we can give them. The best way we can be with that grief is just to allow it to be whatever it is in that moment.
Yeah. And be present for it. The power of presence can never be overstated. And that our presence may be more powerful than our words.
Absolutely. The less we say, the better sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly, if there may be times you don't have words. It's okay. You can tell somebody, I don't know what to say, but I'm here. I'm going to be present for however this unfolds and know that I'm not going anywhere. So give it to me raw, give it to me authentic. And I'm going to be here for however it manifests.
Yeah. And you tell that person that you're that safe person who can handle that, who can be with that, and it's okay.
Well, the other thing, when we're present for somebody's most intimate moments of their lives, and I think a birth, when we get married, when we have kids, those are all intimate moments of our life. But our end of life chapter is perhaps one of the most intimate moments because the veil comes down, we become more honest, we can become more authentic, and will help us treat our end of life chapter as the ultimate spiritual journey. When somebody trusts me with their story of loss or their story of their end of life journey, it's the ultimate gift because they're saying, I trust that you're going to hold space compassionately with integrity and with honor. And a lot of times individuals will ask me, how can you sit and listen to stories of loss? It's got to be depressing. No, it's inspirational. It's uplifting. Because what a lot of people don't see is what happens after the loss, is the metamorphosis that occurs after that. If we're present for the raw stuff and for the messy stuff that is typically grief, we're going to be present for the transformation that occurs afterwards. And knowing that we were a part of that, even a small part of that, is empowering for us and inspires me to continue to do what I do.
Yeah. And doesn't it inspire you to just live your life to the fullest? The more you hear people being honest about their life experience at the end of life and what they wish they'd done or what they are proud of having completed in this life, doesn't it inspire you to just take every day and be grateful for it?
Particularly as I get older, and particularly realizing that I've had the privilege of growing older, where my daughter and a lot of young adults didn't. So I'm grateful for every moment that the good Lord or the universe has given me to do what I do every day and to be a part of my students' lives and my family's lives. And not everybody gets that privilege. And I'm grateful for that every day now.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes getting older, I'm like, oh, well, that's a fun new thing my body's doing. But then I think, wow, I get to experience this.
Mm-hmm.
This is a privilege.
Yep. Just being able to get up, breathe, to have all of our senses about us, be able to walk, be able to move without pain. Those are the little things that we need to be grateful for.
Yeah.
So, well, April, I could sit here and talk to you for about another 2 hours, but I got a couple more questions for you. The first is, if you're going to leave our listeners with just one thing today, what would that be?
Just one thing. I would say just be you. It's the one thing in this life that only you can do. So take off the masks, put everybody else's expectations down, and just be you.
I had a friend of mine tell my class, he said, the hardest thing in life is to be you. And it really, in some ways, should be the easiest thing because who we are should be authentic. It should be real. But like you said, a lot of times we're weighed down by the expectations of others and family contracts and dynamics that really have an impact in terms of how we see the world, which is why I think the human design work you do is so incredibly important.
I think it is And it feels like a cheat sometimes. It feels like that shortcut through some of the work, but it's not. It's just like cutting through a lot of the noise to get to the stuff that matters.
Well, and I think, and I've been a therapist for 33 years, and there's a lot of benefit to good therapy, but there's a lot of things that good therapy can't get to very quickly.
Mhm.
And, you take a look at some of the spiritual holistic practices like human design work, and I also look at other holistic practices, even yoga, meditation, Reiki, and an individual who does shamanistic journeying and
Mhm.
shamanistic holistic healing. Those practices in conjunction with maybe traditional therapies or even by themselves can lead to more clarity than either one alone. And I think sometimes spiritual practices can lead to more instant clarity, depending on the unique circumstances and what the person's dealing with, than talk therapy. So I don't think it's a shortcut at all. I think, if anything, it's a supercharged way to empower somebody very quickly and empower them to find their authentic selves.
Yeah, I like that.
My last question. If people want to find out more about your services, purchase your books, what's the best way for them to do that, April?
So you can find me on my website, aprilporter.com. I'm on Instagram. That's probably the most consistent one I'm on. And then my books can be found through any publisher, any local bookstore can order it. So Amazon or Barnes & Noble. My favorite is your local bookshop, though. Go support your local bookshops.
Absolutely. I believe that our homegrown merchants, our small town merchants, those are the ones that we need to support as opposed to the bigger corporations. Those are the
Yeah.
ones that they're the lifeblood of our community.
Yeah. And they need us.
Yeah. And also the Living Matters podcast. Where can they find your podcast?
You can find that on all major podcast platforms. So Apple, Spotify, I don't know the other ones, but it pushes out to all of them. So wherever you get your podcast.
And again, I would encourage my listeners, take a listen to April's podcast. She's got some great guests. She's a great host. And it's just a very impactful podcast that's putting out a lot of good in the world. April, thank you so much for spending time with me today. As always, I enjoy our conversations, and I hope we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And with that, that is a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.